Welcome back to the Public Relations Podcast for 2025. I thought I'd do another video episode just to prove that I am human, because there was some research out the other day showing that LinkedIn is getting more and more dominated by AI. So unless I am a video, in which case I'll probably get a hole appearing in my face at some point, if I am AI. But if not, this is me. Here's the episode. This is Series 8, Episode 3 of the Public Relations Podcast. And if you're reading the newsletter, the printed newsletter, well, not the printed newsletter, the email newsletter, then we've got up to like 75 or something. I can't even remember what number it is. I'm Richard Midson, and this is a show for PR people who are in-house or energetic agencies who want to know what everyone else is doing in order to share ideas and excel in an industry that seems to be under a lot of pressure, despite the fact, in reality, it's going to be one of the most important to be involved in over the next 10 years. Maybe a little bit of rebranding. But anyway, what do you do when you can't get media coverage? That's the topic of today. Plus, also, I have a comms conundrum for you. Puzzle to test your PR skills again. Will you embrace the crisis about to hit your fiction organization, or will you keep quiet? But let's start off by talking about today's topic. Oh, actually, before I do, must mention, later this week on Thursday, I'm talking to Ellie Jacobs. He's from Purposeful Advisors. Fascinating comms person. He started off working for Bill Clinton, the former US president, and today he does international and US-based PR. But he also talks about how he integrates what he does with the actual business side of some of the clients he's working with. And while you might be working in-house and thinking, well, I can't do that, there's actually a lot in what he says that you can see how you can fit in more your comms role and what you're doing with the business side of the business to make it more valuable, to increase the value of what you're doing within your organization. But anyway, that's coming up on Thursday. For now, let's talk about what to do when you can't get media coverage. And last week, I got a great question from a listener, and it went something like this: if you can't get your announcement or sales message into the media, what can you do instead? I mean, it is such a relevant question today, and I think it's so interesting because it's something that I have spoken to so many people about to get ideas. And so what I'm going to do in this episode is look at some of those ideas that people have shared with me, and also some of the things that I've seen done that work really well as well. The answer, I think, is it's going to take a bit of creativity. And you're going to have to think beyond the traditional media. But I think this is still incredibly relevant to what comms people are doing. Because, you know, whether you're doing something in crisis comms or entertainment PR or finance or public affairs, and I've spoken to people in all those this week, they've all started to have to move beyond traditional media in their comms roles. So let me share you some of the ideas that have been put around. And by the way, if you want more details on this, as always, I try to put as much as I can in these free public relations podcasts. But if you want more, then I'm doing sort of structured guides on how to approach these things in the public relations podcast premium subscribers section. So as usual, it all starts off, and you hear this from everyone I speak to, it all starts off with the who am I going to reach? Who am I trying to reach? What am I trying to get them to do? What do they need to hear to motivate them to take action? So let's say you're a building supplies firm, okay? You know, you want to ask yourself, well, what would make someone choose to buy from us? What would trigger them to action? Is it because they think, oh, I need this particular product, but you've got a high quality service, so I must go to them? Is it that because you've got great customer service? Is it your pricing? What is that thing that sets you apart, that triggers people to want to do that? Now, you probably find the marketing department's already got this stuff, so you can use that point and take it from there and understand it from there. So then at this point, many people kind of go, okay, well, surely what I do now is put out a press release. But remember, we're assuming here you're not going to be able to do that anymore. So what do? You need to start thinking about how to build up this perception, how to build up this belief. And the difference today is that you've got to deliver it through a series of smaller messages rather than just one press release. So let's take a kind of practical example. Let's say you're planning a 10-week campaign, and in the past you might have sent out 10 press releases over those weeks, okay, hoping the repetition would build or whatever, something like that. Today, the approach is very different. Instead of the press releases, you might create 10 pieces of content that reinforce your message. And you know, while there's always going to be a crossover with marketing with this kind of thing, it is just as important for comms, because you're not just putting out product announcements in these. You're doing things which are going to reinforce this message. So it's very much a comms role. So, for example, you might be sharing an infographic one week showing how your product offers the best value. And not just simply saying we are better, but actually giving evidence within it. So again, this is about communications, not just putting out a simple message. The next week, you might release research that validates your claim. You might organize for 10 firms to test your product and then post the results. You could also position your company as a thought leader by joining a campaign to reform something in your industry. You know, say like pricing in construction and become the face of that movement. And don't rule out paid ads. Obviously, that's very much the marketing side of things. But instead of generic ads, come up with a good story, give that to the marketing department and say, look, this is going to make a really good ad. The reason I say that is because I was talking to an agency not that long ago who was working with a Google Ads agency. And what they did was the PR agency themselves came up with the creative, came up with the story, generated the stunts in this particular case, and put out the earned media. And then they got the Google Ads agency to promote it even further. So they boosted the content, they boosted the story rather than just a sales message, because it had far more impact by doing it that way. So instead of relying on that one big hit, and often in the past, I think people sort of thought, well, if we get one press release out about that, that's good enough. But with the way that media's changed now, it gets lost so fast, it doesn't have the same impact. So being able to break up one core message, what you might have done in the past as one press release, into a series of little things, is going to have far more impact today. The other things, beyond just sort of structuring your campaign like that, the next thing to do is to think about your relationships. Now, obviously, this is something crucial to PR. Everyone's all about relationships. But it's not just with journalists anymore. Now, this might sound obvious. You've got to be reaching out to influencers, people like that. But also think about the industry leaders. Think about other organizations. Some of the most successful campaigns that I've heard about are where the PR person has built a network with other people. There was one, I think I mentioned her on the show before, who used to ban all press releases from the office. And the way she did things was she would go and appear on panels at conferences and then network with the other panelists. And then if they had a connection with someone that they wanted to reach in the media, they would work through that person. So by building these relationships, again, it's going way beyond just putting out a press release and just having a relationship with the media. It's about who else in my area could help to get across this same message. The next thing I wanted to mention was about mobilizing people. And what I mean by this is if you look at people like Obama or even Trump, and I'm putting aside the politics as usual, their success wasn't about winning over the press. And yet they were doing a huge comms role here. It was about winning the word of mouth vote. Now, what they did was they recruited members of the public to spread their message within their own circles. And why does this work? Because people know how to talk to their friends better than any PR professional ever could. I mean, what I do in this podcast, if you've told someone else about it, you would have probably said it in a different way to the way I would have done. Because you know your friends, you know what they need better than I do. And this stuff may sound like it's just to preserve politics, but it's not. It's for business too. So how would you get someone to join your movement around a business? Well, the answer lies in understanding what resonates with them, of course. People support causes, they support products or brands that align with their values or solve a problem they care about or want to be seen as being associated with. It's about creating something that feels personal to them. So it's not just a product that works. It's not just something that solves a problem. It's something they feel something about too. The other thing to say as well is that it's crucial to be authentic, and I think, again, this is where PR comes in. This is not about saying we are the best, we are the greatest. It's about meeting people where they are. One of the problems you see companies do is that they go, we've got the best new product. Meanwhile, when you look at everything that's being said about them online or the public perception, people hate the company. And it's like, well, that's just not going to work, because in order to bridge people to where you want them to go, you have to meet them at least part of the way towards where they are right now. And that doesn't mean reflecting the criticism. It means thinking about, the improvements we're making, how we're moving towards this now after some problems in the past or something like that. It's about being authentic. And again, this is very much a comms role to be doing. Also, of course, in authenticity, avoid that corporate speak at all costs. World-class, innovative, groundbreaking. Unless you're backing it up, it just means absolutely nothing. One of the ways I think you can think about this, and I think the automatic pilot of a lot of PR people is to go, okay, well, how can I write a press release? What media outlet can I put it in? Is to think, okay, well, I've got this story. I need to try and put this across. If I had to speak to my friends, if I was going to meet my friends for dinner tonight, how could I tell a story about this that would get my own friends asking me questions about it, getting enthused about it, getting excited about it? So instead of that, the classic like, oh, we're launching this at work, and everyone looking at you going, yeah. what would you need to say that would get them asking you questions, getting them excited about what you're doing? And then how can you break that up into different things that you could be putting out? The next thing to think about is why people share. People share for all sorts of reasons. Sometimes it's because it's content that reflects something they believe in. I use this product because I care about X, like the environment or something like that. Other times they share something because it's useful, like a tip or a piece of advice that might help their friends, or a discount offer, whatever it is. Or maybe it's something they feel strongly about and want others to get on board with too. And they want to and you put out some evidence that they want to share with. This is a common technique in politics, is you put out a fact or figure that someone will then share with someone else because it justifies a point that person believes in. So when you're creating content, think about what it is that is going to resonate with the people. Now, it's very easy to say this, but hopefully you've got that research in that gut background, which shows what actually does resonate with people so that you can really tap into this. Maybe it's a feeling of pride, maybe it's saving money, whatever it is. Make it personal, make it resonate with their lives. For example, say you're a company that sells financial products. Instead of just announcing our product saves money, create a special membership community where customers can share the real results they're getting and exchange tips with others or speak to your experts. You could invite members to track their savings, share their stories, and even suggest ideas for how to use your products more efficiently. It's about engaging them and getting them on board so that they start sharing it. By the way, if you want to run through these notes rather than just listening to it, if you're listening to the audio podcast, then don't forget the Public Relations Podcast newsletter, where you can actually read the words that I've got in here. I was trying to think of another example of kind of a tough industry. And the one I thought of was like debt collection. How would you get people on board with something like debt collection so that they start sharing your message as a debt collecting firm? It's a tough one, right? I mean, the first step, I think, is to shift about how you portray yourself. Maybe you position yourself as the ethical debt collecting agency. Instead of focusing on taking people's possessions or their homes, you focus on helping people break the cycle of debt. So, for example, you could partner with an organization that helps people get out of debt and highlight the number of individuals you've helped avoid repossession. You could even feature stories from people who've successfully turned things around in their lives because of your approach. So by showing you're solving the problem rather than just enforcing it, you'd make yourself more acceptable to businesses who need to recover money as well, because they'd rather be associated with a firm that is seen as being ethical than one that is just being seen as heavy-handed. So it's all about positioning that stuff. And again, the details are going to vary, depending on your industry. But the principle is the same. It's about finding a way to present yourself that resonates with people you're trying to reach. And by building something that resonates with them on a personal level. And just like in politics, movements are powerful because they're driven by people. They're not driven by organizations. The best comms people know this. They know it's not about putting out one press release and hoping it gets picked up. It's about delivering a series of messages that build up a narrative that people can believe in, talk about, and share. The irony, I think, is that when you do this well, media coverage often follows. Once you've created something that people are already engaging with and talking about, journalists start paying attention. Suddenly your story becomes newsworthy, not because you pitched it, but because you made it interesting. There was a friend of mine, actually, the other day, has been on national TV and national news in the UK after a pretty small little piece that they did. And it's for a charity. And they just did sort of various sponsored runs, and it got picked up just a little bit. They managed to get, because they've been doing so much stuff with it, it got picked up as a very small segment on a news program. And then everyone else has covered it. It's been in national newspapers, it's been on national TV, on breakfast shows and things like that. It all picked up because there was that initial bit of a spark in there. So if you're not getting media coverage, don't despair. Just think bigger. Think about how you can generate that momentum yourself. Start it off small. Build those relationships, engage people in ways that feel personal, human, and authentic, and build that momentum so that it does get picked up by the media because the story is growing. I hope some of this gave you some practical ideas. There's so many ideas that have been shared with me over the years and that I've seen myself. And if you've got questions or examples you want to share, I'm always looking to connect with organizations that want to sort of build innovative, narrative-driven PR strategies and hear about how you are approaching it. So if you've got a particular thing that you are working on, let me know. I would love to hear how you're approaching it, how you're tackling it. And of course, if there's anything I can do to help or share any of the ideas that I've heard about in this show, then do let me know. You can always drop me a message on LinkedIn. Directly, just search for Richard Midson if you're listening to the audio podcast, which is Midson. So let me round up there because I'm not going to be able to get the comms conundrum into this because I've been going on too long. So I'm going to release that a little bit later in the week. I have got that interview with Ellie Jacobs. That is going to be absolutely brilliant. Have a listen in for that one a little bit later in the week as well. In the meantime, if you've got any questions, of course, reach out to me, Richard Midson, Midson on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with you. I'd love to hear what you're up to. I'd love to hear some of your behind-the-scenes techniques as well. I'll be talking more about that over the coming weeks too. So next thing will be Ellie Jacobs and Comms Conundrum later in the week as well. Speak to you then.